just tip that so everybody will know that as well. So, Mr. Shirley, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Awesome. I'm here today to speak on behalf of all hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens here inside of the United States. I've helped bring to light widespread fraud that's happening inside our nation, and we the people have had enough of our hard-earned money going towards fraudsters as if it's no big deal. As I speak here, I want to ask everyone a question. How much do we trust when we pay our taxes it's going to benefit our nation? People erupted during the Boston Tea Party over just a few percentages as they believe they were being taxed without representation. Nowadays, we have the representation, but do we trust our representatives? My name is Nick Shirley, and I made a 41-minute video that I posted on platforms like X and YouTube. My video received over 100 million views, and it created instant change within our government. As the federal government launched investigations in departments such as Health and Human Services froze over $185 million in childcare funding until businesses can prove they are legitimate businesses. I actually became aware of the fraud that was happening in Minnesota in June of 2025 as I was there for a separate video in Minnesota and started reaching out to me asking me if I was making a video on the fraud. I said, well, what fraud? And this lady, she was a real estate agent, and she says, well, I'm having a hard time selling my properties because people are curious about these assisted livings that are popping up next door to some of the houses that we're buying, or the home health care clinics that are popping up, and we don't know who's next to these houses that we're trying to sell. And I said, well, I'm not gonna come and make a video if I don't have any proof. So therefore I left Minnesota, and I continued to look for fraud in the best way I could. And as I was getting my own information, a man by the name of David reached out to me and he said, hey, I have been investigating this fraud for years now. I have been driving by these child care centers. I've never seen a single child, and I have received information from the state of Minnesota as to how much money these places are receiving. I said, great, let me come to Minnesota and we'll make this video about potential fraud that was taking place inside of Minnesota. We go to a daycare, and I'm instantly surprised by what we see. We arrived and it was an industrialized building, and there was 2 daycares registered at that building. And the first thing I noticed is all the windows are blacked out, and there's no footprints in the snow of any children. There's no playgrounds or anything that would make it look like it's a child care. But above me, a sign read, open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But there was nobody there. The doorbell did not even work. And then we continued to go to other daycares, and we noticed the same pattern. No children, blacked out windows, and one daycare, a learning center, spelled Quality Learning Center instead of Quality Learning Center. They had received $1.9 million, yet with that $1.9 million, they could not even spell Leering right on their sign. Governor Walz has said he's been fighting fraud in Minnesota since 2019 and said the buck stops with him. However, how long would it take for you to notice $1 million leaving your bank account and not knowing where it's going? That's essentially what had been happening in Minnesota for years as billions of dollars had been misplaced. And meanwhile, while people like Governor Tim Walz call people like me a white supremacist, delusional conspiracy theorist, he actually decided to drop out of re-election because I believe of how deep and extensive this fraud is. Thank you very much. Since my reporting, the HHS department froze over $185 million, and to this day, not a single business has been able to prove proof of legitimacy. How fast would you be proving that you are a legitimate business if you have children to actually feed and to take care of? You'd be sending in that paperwork instantly. I made this video to document the widespread fraud that has been taking place, as I truly believe all fraud is bad. And people like me, my generation, we're sick of seeing tax dollars go towards fraud. We just want to have the same opportunities that our fathers and our grandparents had. And when you see people making millions of dollars by committing fraud, it upsets everybody from all age demographics. And so I hope today we can have a good conversation, and I think we can all agree that fraud is bad and that fraud is fraud. And I wish the best for our country, and I think that's what needs to be happening is to crack down on all forms of fraud. So thank you for having me, and God bless the USA.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. And now I recognize Ms. Larson for your 5-minute opening statement.
Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today on this issue. My name is Jennifer Larson. I'm the founder and CEO of Holland Center in Minnesota. I've been an autism provider for over 20 years and started the organization for my son. I built Holland Center because families with children like mine were desperate for help, desperate for services and stability, desperate for somewhere they could trust their child would be supported and helped, not sent home on a bad day, not babysat in a classroom and forgotten. We serve the children that don't succeed in public school settings. What started as a small program grew over 2 decades into 4 locations that families rely on, not just for therapy, but for hope, routine, and survival. This work is a labor of love for me. Just like me, there are providers all over the state laboring with love to help these children. And this week, Holland and other programs all over Minnesota are collapsing. Not because we committed fraud, but because a crime ring was allowed to operate inside Minnesota's service system, and the government's clumsy response is now destroying legitimate, long-standing providers and devastating families that we serve. Families come to Holland, they do not have a backstop. Their children often receive 30 or more hours of therapy a week. These are not an extravagance, these are medically necessary. These children learn to communicate, regulate their emotions, reduce dangerous behaviors, and function in daily life. For many parents, therapy determines if they can work. Consistent staff and therapy prevents severe behaviors and regression. Structured care keeps children and their siblings safe. When services disappear, families do not just simply adjust, they face a crisis. For more than 2 decades, Holland has served hundreds of children year after year, employed hundreds of clinicians and staff, operated under yearly on-site audits, inspections, and documentation oversight, delivered real services to real children every day. We have always complied with everything the system required. Yet, within the last month, the state has withheld over $400,000 in Medicaid funds for my own program, and that number grows every single day. I had to infuse my personal funds to survive these weeks, but can't do that any longer without payment. Let me be clear, we are a fee-for-service industry. When we can't pay our staff, we lose our staff and children lose care. Families do not lose appointments, they lose the people they trust. What happened in Minnesota had nothing to do with the ethical, long-standing autism providers. What did happen was organized criminal networks that exploited autism services by opening fake centers, billing for children that did not exist, billing for services never delivered, and stealing millions of taxpayer dollars in the process. These are not minor compliance issues. They are criminal enterprises. Families trusted that the government was protecting the integrity of the system. It failed. Now, instead of doing the obvious thing and targeting criminal actors, the response has been to freeze everyone's payments. That decision does not punish the criminals. It punishes innocent children and families. As Medicaid payments are delayed due to prepayment review by an insurance company that is in the business of denying claims, providers are reducing hours, cutting staff, and starting to close. Families are scrambling for alternatives that don't exist, children are regressing, parents are leaving jobs to care for their disabled children. Autism therapy cannot be paused without consequences. Loss of services can erase years of progress in weeks, and abrupt disruption of services can cause lifelong consequences in these children. This is not abstract harm. It is daily trauma for families already carrying an extraordinary burden. The simple solution to the problem: send the criminals to jail and allow trusted providers with decades of clean audits, verified ownership structures to continue providing prescribed ethical therapy, and go back to paying them what we've earned and resume paying them on time. I built Holland for 20 years. Families built their lives around the care that we provide. All of that is risk of destruction today, not by fraud, but by clumsy government response that failed to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities.
The gentlelady will suspend. We've got a photographer there. We allow photographers in here, but not between the panel of the witnesses and the members. You will please move.
Okay.
Photographer, please move.
Thank you.
Like right now.
Okay. Sorry. All of that is at the risk of destruction. Sorry, can I continue?
Yeah, please continue.
Not by fraud, but the clumsy government response that fails to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities as acceptable collateral damage. Fraud must be stopped and criminals prosecuted. I'm a taxpayer. I live in Minnesota. This is disgusting. But families and children should never pay the price for government failure. Thank you.
We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Besides the work Mr. Shirley has done, I want to recognize Powerline, who has done yeoman's work exposing this over the last decade, what has happened. And I just want to say, Ms. Larson, I live in northern Wisconsin. There's an autism school that was started in my community. Where did we visit when we wanted to start that a decade ago? We came to Minnesota, where you have been leaders in having good autism programs. And I think about the tremendous fraud that has gone on in nutrition programs, housing programs, but is there anything more heinous than abusing an autism program?
I can't imagine. It's so hard to believe that people are faking that children have autism and stealing money from the government. When I'm sitting here with my 25-year-old non-speaker, and now children like my son aren't going to have services because they stole money from the government and faked these things. And it is, like I said, disgusting.
With what's going on right now, what are the families that you're serving? What are they saying?
They're scared.
What are they doing?
Everybody's scared. There are centers that are programs that have already shut down. Staff are leaving. I, this week, asked my staff who will take unpaid leave because we can't keep going like this. I'm like I said, I'm 400,000 plus in debt now, and I'm not sure these are going to get paid back. I went to a bank and they wouldn't back the receivable because they said that's not a receivable. If it's prepayment review, you may not get it.
And Ms. Larson, none of this would have happened if the fraud did not occur. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Mr. Dexter, could have something been done about this earlier?
Yes. As I stated in my opening testimony, in the years that I worked there, we identified how fraud was occurring, the loopholes that existed, and we.
What were some of the warning signs, Mr. Dexter?
Well, the fact that part of our job was to go and collect attendance records. We would find attendance records that were either incomplete, non-existent. Obviously, there were times we found them to be fabricated because they were given to us way later, and the same with billing records. They were allowed 30 days after the end of the billing period to submit billing records, so they were not immediately available to us, and it kind of allowed overpayments or double payments to be overlooked. So we had the attendance record issue. We had the fact that there was no way to verify who was signing the children in and out. No way to verify what times those children were signed in and out.
Could I do a follow-up here? In Wisconsin, we learned this month that Ibrahimia Diop, a Minneapolis school finance boss, placed on leave for failing to submit required financial paperwork with the Minneapolis School District and for signing questionable contracts linked to the Somali fraud scandal, was hired by the Milwaukee Public School System as a deputy superintendent at a salary of $240,000 a year. Do you think it wise? Might that be a warning sign that this person was involved, may have been involved with fraud in Minneapolis? Shouldn't they be concerned in Wisconsin that that they're hiring someone like that?
Well, if somebody that they hire has a past history and practice of doing that type of stuff, I would be very leery of it occurring again, or that being the basis that they're hired.
So Governor Evers refused to open the books and is blocking federal audits of our food stamp and Medicaid programs. And he also vetoed 4 auditor positions in a recent budget. Do you think that is also a warning sign?
Yes, if it's preventing...
Or ill-advised, would that be a better way to pose the question?
Yeah, if it prevents the oversight and the ability to audit and look at the records to make sure, can have a check and balance system, I think that'd be very unwise because, again, that allows fraud to occur.
Because, Mr. Shirley, what is happening in Minnesota, it could be happening throughout the United States. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
If there's one thing we've learned or leered, as they say in Minneapolis, isn't it possible that this is happening everywhere?
Yes, I believe it is.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the ranking member of the whole committee, Mr. Raskin, for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank all the witnesses for your excellent testimony. Mr. Hedler-Gaudet, the administration has systematically undermined government oversight. The president has fired more than a dozen inspectors general, not for any cause, but seemingly just in retaliation for doing their jobs and to block unwanted investigations. President Trump has defunded the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. He's removed independent leadership at the Office of Special Counsel and Office of Government Ethics, blockading whistleblowers and numerous investigations. What is your assessment, Mr. Hedler-Gaudet, of the Trump administration's apparent systematic opposition to internal oversight mechanisms in the federal government?
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin. My assessment is that the last year or so has been one of the most anti-oversight, anti-accountability periods that I've witnessed in our federal government. And I think the things you laid out, as well as others, are the sort of proof in the pudding there. And I think, speaking of things that should be giving us pause and raising red flags, that should all be giving us serious pause and raising serious red flags about how seriously people who claim to take oversight, accountability, fraud, how seriously do they actually take it?
There's been a lot of attention given to Donald Trump's extraordinary use of the pardon power, as in the pardon of violent insurrectionists and cop beaters. But there's also been a forgiveness of $1.5 billion in restitutionary fines that various people had to pay. And a lot of them are fraudsters. The DOJ in Trump's first term brought bank fraud and tax evasion charges against reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley. They were convicted in 2022. They owed more than $22 million in restitution to taxpayers and to their victims. But then Trump suddenly, inexplicably pardoned them and forgave all of the money that they were supposed to be paying back to their victims. Todd Chrisley bragged publicly about his get out of jail free card, jubilantly exclaiming, "The feds got effed." Let me give you one other example. Trump on April 23rd issued a pardon for Paul Walchuk, a former nursing home exec who pleaded guilty to multiple tax crimes. What he was doing was taking millions of dollars from the nurses and orderlies and doctors who worked for him at his facilities, took more than $10 million that way, instead of giving it to the IRS for their taxes. He used the money to buy a $2 million yacht and to pay for high-end jet travel and to go shopping at Bergdorf Goodman and Cartier. Well, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison for stealing his employees' tax withholdings, and he was ordered to pay his employees back $4.4 million for the money he looted from their accounts. So he's gonna have to pay that back, but then he got his mom to go to a glitzy fundraising dinner for Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and she paid $1 million for her ticket. Then, right after Trump was inaugurated in his second term, Walchuk petitioned for a presidential pardon, arguing that he was the victim of political retaliation because they were Trump supporters. And what do you know? President Trump issued a complete pardon with forgiveness of all of the financial fines and restitution that Mr. Walchuk was going to have to pay back to his workers, the nurses and doctors and orderlies. So that was forgiven. That was $4 million taken away from the victims of a fraud and given back to the perpetrator of the fraud. Okay, now, if we had all day, we could go on all day with this because that's how their pay-to-play pardon system works. What does this do to our efforts to root out fraud and corruption systematically in the government and in crimes in different industries.